How are you doing, YouTube? It's your friendly gamer, SmartEntity here. I know it's been a while, but I am back. So today I've got quite a special video for you guys. It's basically when Warframe powers are bad. Now, as you guys know, with Warframe powers, they are usually good at a situation, not as good in other situations. So today's video is going to be about the worst power. We're going to start off with the worst power and keep on going, see how things go. So it's going to be worse from not as worse. Now, the worst power in the game currently, without any competition, is Zypher's Tornado. I am in a T3 survival, so I mean, in the first 5 minutes, nothing too spectacular. But as you can see, when you cast on Tornado, now I actually have fleeting expertise on, so the duration is quite short. But if you don't have fleeting expertise on, if you're using something like a duration build for third power, which is actually quite good, the tornadoes are going to be on for a long time. Now the problem with this power is, even if you're at decently mid to high level, the power is not enough to kill an enemy. And the problem is, it flanks enemies around the map, and what that does is it makes them, more better at dodging bullets, so harder for you to kill them. In a survival, the key to surviving long is to kill enemies fast, so they'll drop more of those mini life supports, and then the faster you kill, the more they'll drop, and then obviously the more enemy will spawn, and the cycle goes on. And Tornado directly counters that. So it's definitely not good in survival. But this, having said that, there's actually not a single occasion where Tornado is good. In other situations, Tornado is just not as bad. Because, I'm sure there'll be one of you, thinking Tornado saved you so many times. And to be honest, the power is designed for crowd control, so I'm not surprised that he saved you once or twice. But, if you think about Nexus Chaos or Excalibur's Radio Blind, or about literally, half the other powers out there, they are also just as good at keeping you alive, and a lot of them are actually much, much better at crowd control. And of course, we see the same thing in defense as well. In defense, it's not as big a deal, but you're pretty much wasting everyone's time. Now, again, it makes enemies dodge bullets much easier, and just makes them obviously, take that much longer to kill. And as you can see, I'm in Satura here, so the enemies are decently high leveled, and it's taking a long time to kill them. And if you think about all other mission types, your sort of capture, sabotage, deception, when are you really going to cast Tornado, right? And if you think about Exterminate, again, same story. It's going to take you so much longer to kill enemies, and this power just all around is just horrible. It goes from having a slightly negative impact to being a complete counterproductive power. So that's why Tornado, in my opinion, is the single worst power in this game currently. Now, to be fair, I will show you guys. So this is a mod setup I used in those couple missions. Yes, I don't have a potato on. That's mainly because Zypher is a horrible frame at baseline, and I'm not going to waste a potato or 20 plate equivalent on it. But having said that, let's look at logic, right? So I do have fleeting expertise and streamline on there, but how would you really mod this? You can put intensify on there, again, with high level gameplay, anything above 20-minute survival or 15-wave defense. That intensify is going to scale off very fast. So again, you're not going to be able to kill the enemies very fast, and it's counterproductive. And if you go for a duration build, which is the general recommended build for a Zypher to optimize turbulence, Tornado is going to be, again, that much worse because, with a longer duration, the enemies are being flanked around longer. So again, counterproductive. So, doesn't matter how you really mod this, even if you take out fleeting expertise and say put in a blind rage, again, that extra power is going to scale off, power strength is going to scale off very fast, and it's just going to not be worth it. So no matter how you look at it, Tornado is just a bad power. Okay, so the next two powers, in fact, I'm going to talk about, both belong to Hydroid. Now, unlike Tornado, this power is actually situational. And the next one I'm talking about is Hydroid's ultimate, which is Tenticle Swarm. Now, like Tornado, this power basically, flanks enemies around, making them harder to kill. So it is situational, but unlike Tornado, this power is actually a lot stronger. So for your sort of lower level defense, in fact even mid-level defense survival, Tenticle Swarm is okay. You know, it does kill enemies, it does do it reasonably fast, but at any high level defense, survival, any high level gameplay, again it has that negative impact like Tornado, where enemies are flying around, making them dodge bullets, and simply just reduce enemy killing rate. This power is okay for some of the lower or beginning players, I guess, you know, that is able to get this Warframe, because it will probably be stronger than your weapon, so it is okay. So it is situational. Now again, I'm sure there will be a lot of you guys saying, you know, Tenticle Swarm is so strong, it saves you multiple times, but compared to that, you know, this to some of the other ultimates, things like, you know, Excalibur's Radio Javelin, Max Crush, Frost's Avalanche, you know, they're all sort of ultimate AoE damagers, and they pretty much, you know, may not be able to kill high level enemies, but you can cast them, you can recast them. It's not an issue. I'm going to talk about that a bit more, but as a simpler side note, you know, with Hydroid, you know, you usually don't really want to use fleeting expertise, because Hydroid's powers do depend on duration, whereas something like Frost or Mag, you can use fleeting expertise, so making, you know, spamming the force power that much better. And even with, you know, fleeting expertise aside, you can't spam this because there is a duration counter, so you do need to wait until this power's counter runs out before you can cast it again, unlike something like Avalanche, where you can, you know, continuously spam. So all in all, this is why I consider Tenticle Swarm to be the second worst power. Nowhere near as bad as Tornado, but not as good as some of the other powers. Now the third worst power is basically Undertow, which is this. Now I'm in a defense, so I cast Undertow, everything's synced in, and you can see the damage numbers there. They take minimal damage, so chances are when the Undertow stops, you know, all the enemies are still alive. Now I'll be the first to admit, this, you know, is situational. There's some great combos, namely Undertow and Nova's antimatter drop, that could be extremely strong. But having said that, you know, if you don't have a good team, or if you're in a random team, and someone casts Undertow and then don't get out of it, it's going to delay defense by a lot. If you're in a survival, it's going to decrease enemy kills, it's going to decrease enemy spawns, it's going to decrease life support. It's just not good. You know, it probably will save you, you know, if you add that 2, you know, HP, it's pretty gonna save you. But when you get out, again, unless, you know, you got anti-drop ready to explode, you're probably gonna die anyway, right? Sure, your shield may recharge, but at high level, it's not gonna well. There's just so many better powers to kill enemies. Again, I'll talk about the modding of it a bit later, but generally, all in all, this is why I consider Undertow to be the third worst power currently in the game. Okay, so this is a setup I used in that mission. By no means is this a good build, by no means am I recommending this build. It's basically the first couple of reasonable mods I saw. I slapped it on. But basically with Hydroid, you know, I'm sure most people would agree, Undertow and Tenticle Swarm are the two powers that are unique, and are the two powers that you want to sort of optimize or maximize. Now you got two options, right? One option would be to do a duration build, where you can't use narrow-minded, because that'll just make these powers quite literally completely useless. So without narrow-minded, you got constitution and continuity. Now the problem with a duration build is you can't recast these powers. Obviously with Undertow you can't recast while you know, Undertowed, but with Tenticle Swarm, which is a ultimate damage AoE dealer, you can't spam it, right? Which is what you usually like to do with, you know, as I said before, something like Avalanche. You can't kill the enemy once, you cast Avalanche again, you can't do it a second time, you cast it again. If you can't kill it a third time, you probably should be doing something else. But anyway, you can't kill it with one shot, so you can't recast this. I know while the tentacles are up, you're doing damage, but the damage is just not good enough. So even if you say, don't use the duration and you got full fleeting expertise, so it's an anti-duration build. Again, you can't really kill enemies fast enough, and it's a static power, so it stays there. It doesn't go with you, so not radial. So it's pretty much only really probably useful in defense. But because it can't kill enemies fast enough and it makes enemies dodge bullets, it's again counterproductive. And in things like sabotage, deception, capture, and whatnot, I can't imagine why people would want to use this power at baseline. So all in all, Tenticle Swarm, second worst power, Undertow, third worst power. Now the next power I'm going to talk about is Well of Life. Now this power, again, is unlike the first three powers, it's not counterproductive, but it also isn't very useful either. It definitely just simply doesn't justify the slot it occupies. So the way it works is you cast, this guy is a bit, temporarily stunned, not unlike being in Vauban's Ballistically or Bastille. And when you damage it, you and whoever else is around gets a bit of health boost. Now, the thing with this power is, yes, it's a first power, so it doesn't cost that much energy, but honestly, it just doesn't justify the slot it occupies. Because with the recent change in Trinity, change in energy vampire, energy pretty much have infinite energy, right? And with infinite energy, you can cast infinite blessing. So, why bother dealing with a Well of Life where you get some health, maybe, when you can cast Blessing and everyone in the team get max health. Depending on your build, I do admit if you do an anti-duration Blessing build, you can obviously have quite frequent heals. If you got a duration build, then well, you should be casting it when you're at low HP, in which case, again, it just Blessing is much superior than Well of Life, and given they're both on the same frame, the end story is Well of Life doesn't justify the slot it occupies, it doesn't justify the energy cost, even though Trinity can potentially have infinite energy, and it doesn't justify the time used to cast it. Yes, you only take a second, but that second you could be, taking a drink of coffee if you like, right? Okay, so just to show you guys the build quickly, this is basically what I use to demonstrate the Well of Life power. Now, unlike Zypher and Hydroid, especially Zypher, which I consider to be, definitely a low tier frame, Trinity is definitely actually a high tier frame. Now, I wouldn't say it's an essential frame for beginner to mid-level players, but for your long level, long defense, long survival, Trinity definitely have a place, and it's definitely one of the top frames. So this is the build I used, but if you are doing, say, 60, 80 plus T4 survival, what you want to do actually is take out Rejuvenation, put in Corrosive Projection, and you want to take out Well of Life and put in Intensify so you can get more energy from that energy vampire. And it's really up to you if you want to do a one from top fleeting expertise and one from top streamline, or full fleeting and then rank 2 streamline. And same with Blessing, either max or unranked, that's down to preference. But this is pretty much the setup I would recommend for a long survival, and this is a optimized specialized setup. Okay, so the fifth and final power we're going to talk about today, no, it's not Absorb. Despite the nerf, Absorb is still one of the strongest powers in the game, but it is a power that belongs to Nyx, and is power number 2 Psychic Bolt. Now, again, this power, it doesn't have any counterproductive properties, but it is in a class like Well of Life, where the amount of damage it does just doesn't justify its mod slot. And if this was a first power where it costs 25 energy, okay, not a big deal, right? So we have a lot of those powers. But it's actually a second power, and without any energy efficiency mods, it costs 50 energy. And for 50 energy, even if you max it out, it does very little damage. It doesn't justify the energy cost, it doesn't justify the mod slot, it's overall just bad. Basically, you shoot, you aim, and you can aim, and the way it works is if you shoot and press zoom immediately, it actually auto-seeks the target, which is quite useful. But again, with its low damage output and just overall energy cost, and because it is next one of the best frames in the game, there are a lot of really useful mods that compete for that same mod slot. So overall, it's not so much this power is such a bad power, but it's just that this power is pretty useless, and it is. Let's say it brings shame to Nyx, right? Nyx is a great frame, and this power, simply put, brings shame to Nyx. Okay, so a quick look at the build I used. Now, like Trinity, Nyx is definitely a top tier frame, but a quick interesting to note is for high level gameplay, which Nyx can definitely hold its own, you want to use overextended to optimize absorb as well as chaos, I suppose. But the thing with overextended is it actually decreases power strength, which makes Psychic Bolt's damage more useless. For low level gameplay, where you want to toggle on off absorb very fast to do mass AoE kills very fast, you can replace this with Intensify, and by low level I mean probably less than level 15, right? Anything less than level 15, you can replace overextended with Intensify for that high base damage, in which case Psychic Bolts will be okay. But the vast majority of gameplay, when you are at this stage with all these max mods, you're probably doing high level where you want to use overextended instead of Intensify, and Psychic Bolts again just doesn't go with the build at all. Now, replacing Psychic Bolt with Rush or any other mod you like, this is a again optimized specialized build for high level, T4 60, 80, 2 hour plus gameplay. However, for that kind of gameplay, you do need a proper team setup, proper strategy. But this setup will get you up there. Alright guys, so I think that's about it for today. Now, one thing that you guys may have seen with my Trinity and Nyx build is instead of using something like Vitality Redirection, I'm using Vitality Rage and Quick Thinking. From my experience, these three mods are extremely good for long survival. I will discuss that in a later video, which I'm planning to release next week, for extremely long level gameplay, but practical gameplay. So stay tuned, I'll release that next week. In the meantime, I know this video where I pretty much criticize certain powers is a bit unique. Most of the videos, I think, the vast majority of videos out there on YouTube are to say how good this is, how good that is, but this gives a sort of alternative look. So please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you guys think about it. But please don't say, oh, that power is so good in that situation, or that power is so good in that situation, because like I said, there are other powers where it's so much better in said particular situation. Alright guys, cheers. But I guess it's okay for some mediocre fireworks.
Multiple biosignatures detected. We've got infested in
if only it exploded.